So Krista, you look confused. Are you hearing us? Okay, good. So roll call. Valerie Renthaler. Adam McDowell.
Here.
Brooke Burchett Williams.
Here.
Matt Castilla.
Here.
Deb Cassini Klein.
Here.
And Diane Law.
Here.
Jay Doran. And Mayor Paul Gamrat.
Is the meeting, are we starting to talk? Because I can't hear anything over here. I don't know.
I don't hear anything.
Yeah.
Either.
I heard everybody except for Jay on the roll call.
Kind of.
Not like a testing. Now I'm in like a press conference. Hello.
All right. Yeah, I can hear you now.
So, can you hear me now?
Yeah. Yes.
I have about
So the one receiver's out. It's not receiving. It's been switched on and off. So some of the mics probably are not going to hit that receiver.
So just to add to our technical fund, one of the receivers is not working properly. So even though the mics are on, it doesn't necessarily pick up. So such the world we live in. But you can hear me now, so we'll move from there. And then for the purpose of roll call, first of all, I'm in fact here. For the purposes of moving to public comment, what I was saying directly after that was we moved straight into public comment on a workshop, and that we had seen that April Klein who had her hand raised prison, so we had promoted her, and the floor is April's if she would like to.
Jay,
Hey, April.
I can't hear you. I can hear Alex. You sound like you're in a tunnel far, far away. Can you hear me speaking?
I can hear you perfectly fine.
All right, thank you. Thanks for the opportunity to comment. I wanted to share something, a concern that some of the Holland Road residents have. When you come off the Parkway, I-376 into Churchill, and you get off at 79B, you get off at Churchill Road and Holland Road, and some of us that live on Holland, we think of this as the gateway to Churchill Borough. So Holland Road residents maintain the island at the intersection with the green Holland Road, Churchill Road sign. We maintain a garden there, and we're very proud that that is a nice entry into the borough. However, we have a concern with the property at 2 Holland Road. It's the group home. And in recent weeks, they have not removed their trash receptacles from the curb. They've been out there for over 2 weeks. And of course, that looks rather messy. And they erected a gazebo, a temporary gazebo this summer, which none of us have ever seen any staff or residents use. And in a recent windstorm, that gazebo was destroyed and is now in several pieces on the front yard. It's been like a mess for over a month, which is also not welcoming. They aren't plowing their driveway, so all the staff is parking on the road. And they're not just parking on the shoulder, they're parking into the road because of the snow. So when you come from the Beulah Road on Churchill Road and then turn into Holland, you almost rear end the cars that are parking there. So it would be really nice if the borough could send them a reminder that trash cans do not stay permanently at the curb for weeks at a time. And they have, they operate 24/7. It would be nice if the 2 to 4 staff cars that were always there could park in their double driveway and not block the entrance to Holland Road. So that's my first comment. My second comment is, as most of you know, I am a member of Churchill Garden Club and the Garden Club of Forest Hills. And I know at the last council meeting, various council members spoke as to why the Yagle Room was not yet open. And yet it is a concern for me because the Garden Club has spent over $450 in 2021 to rent meeting space at other facilities. We use the Westinghouse Lodge, we've used the Blackridge Civic Center, we've used St. John Fisher Church. And this is money for a small organization such as ourselves that we could have used for programs or to buy plants for the community gardens or the rain gardens. Maybe $450 doesn't sound like much to council, but it's a lot to a small organization. And I'm still concerned, why is the Yagle Room, which has a separate entrance, separate restroom, separate kitchen from the rest of the borough building, not open to community groups in the borough, such as the Stamp Club and the Recreation Board and Churchill Garden Club? You could put a limit on it. I know in the Garden Club of Forest Hills, if we go to the Forest Hills Municipal Building, we have to limit it to 30 people. But it really seems unfair that we're the only borough building in the area that is not open to residents. Maybe you don't want residents at your borough council meetings, but the Yagle Room was funded by a gift from Mr. Yagle for the use as a community center, and it should be open to a community center. And I'd like to see why
I've kind of extended extra time to you because you were the only commenter, but that is time. And I'll address kind of both these briefly, and then we're going to kind of move into our workshop space. First, the status of a group home is immaterial. It's not something that matters in terms of how we address or enforce code. So I'm going to set that status apart because that has nothing to do with our enforcement. That being said, I think, we have been and continue to be concerned about both of the issues that you brought up, both not just for that resident, but for any resident. And so that's certainly something that we will make sure goes out if it hasn't already. Certainly garbage cans are not to be out, quite frankly, I would call this as a personal pet peeve of Ray's for a very long time, and I hold that true. They should be brought back, right after or the next day. They're not to be out like that. It doesn't matter who, how, or when, unless you're a person with a disability who needs a reasonable accommodation, at which time you would need to make that request. The second part of that, debris or other things, same thing, right? These are not tolerable spaces. And so irrespective of who it is, those are things that we would expect to be enforced. And I will certainly speak with Alex to make sure that Alex, if he hasn't already, and I'm sure he's already taken note down, so I have very little worry about that, but that moves forward. As for the Yagle Room, I think if you look at the agenda, you'll find the number 17 that is in fact on the agenda as something that we're going to be discussing tonight in our workshop. So I think your comments are timely again, and certainly will be taken into consideration by all the members of council when we have that discussion. So I appreciate your comments at this time. I'm going to look and see if there's any other hand raised, and if not.
Just real quick, April, for the record, can you please state your address?
You're always good to make sure I'm on. Thank you. April, can you give your address on Holland?
Yes, it's 18 Holland Road, which you all know very well, and you muted me or I would have given.
It is a matter of protocol and Matt's right, even though that's how I end up skipping it, because yes, I know it's you, April. So we're good.
Other people just say their road. You always want my house number. Other people get away with saying
it's
their road.
Okay. You can get away with Holland Road. Everyone gives me their full address, quite frankly, but I understand your point. Okay, we're gonna move forward into our discussion items. No, there were no other comments. Yeah, that's all right. Twice.
Yep.
So we're going to move forward through our discussion items at this time, moving on to number 3, which is just effectively what we got so far in terms of reporting. if anybody had questions, concerns, acknowledgements. Generally moves fairly quick at this pace, but if there is something, happy to discuss. And I'm a little off on my kind of reporting space in that those of you who know I got back from vacation a little bit late this week, as I expected to be back on a Thursday and came back on a Saturday and spent time in the airport. So forgive me if I haven't had a time to review anything myself.
And if I can address item number 4, the
Yes, please.
acknowledgement of the reports, we did a little different with the agenda this time. So for those who are committee chairs, you'll see your committee name with the item number that you'll get a chance to address. So you can either just say something about your report now, if you like, just said it's will be submitted or it has been submitted. But later on, there'll be opportunity for you to address the particular items that you want council to act on at a future meeting on the agenda. And both of those should work now. I reset the receiver. So
Okay.
for what it's worth,
So
you
let
can
me-
move
let
that
me-
one back over to one of the council members.
Let me see if they both work as I pass things around me. People still hearing me? All right, I feel good about that then. Yeah, take my wins where I can. Okay. So as you heard, things were done a little bit differently, which is actually helpful. And then it moves kind of into the borough structure that, or the committee structure that we talked about before, which kind of brings us through the thing about 4, that it kind of combines itself into the rest of them, and that they sit as the actual individual spaces for a lot of this and the action items, which is totally fine and not a question. But before we run through those, is there anything else that's not on here in terms of committee reports or things to discuss within the committees?
I'll just mention that the infrastructure committee is scheduled to meet on Wednesday this week, so we'll have our formal report for the binder for next week.
Excellent. Police, public safety needs to meet.
Safety is meeting in 2 weeks before our next regular council meeting, and there'll be quite a few things that we'll be addressing in that committee report.
Is busy times for a few of these for sure. And I appreciate everybody's work in each of the spaces. If there isn't anything else, we'll move on to 5, if that's acceptable for folks. 5 being the space over the replacement of our wonderful Krista. And Alex, if you want to give a quick statement on it, I think we understand where we're at for the majority of council. But if you want to kind of put any input before I kind of jump into space.
Just quickly, we had over 70 interested individuals, about 20 complete applications. We did at least 20 phone screens and have had 5 different Zoom conference interviews with various candidates. And we have a top candidate that we've begun a discussion, and we've done the reference checks for them. There's a number of background checks that we'll need to complete, but we're in the process of trying to come to an agreement for a conditional offer. The conditional offer will be conditional on passing the background checks, including a drug screen and proof of vaccination. Some of those things would need to be checked. So right now, I don't have a name for you because we haven't finalized that with the top candidate.
But we are progressing in a way that would afford us to probably extend that offer and for council to approve the extension of that
Krista's
offer.
last day, as you can see on the next item, is February 18th. So we're hoping over the next few days, we can enable them to give their employer notice, and we can begin the process of getting a start date.
And so for the purposes of this, there's an action item on a motion to permit the extension of the conditional offer. Is it necessary by motion?
And I think what Alex and I talked about briefly was maybe just either having that set up for the meeting next week, and it can, depending on the timing, it can be either ratifying or
Yeah,
authorizing.
That's all I'm saying.
Yep.
Is you can move forward with the will of council, I think, without question. And then, in terms of the meeting, that's fine. Okay, I just wanted to make sure that we weren't saying that he needed that in order to move forward. So outstanding. Any other discussion on this matter? Pretty cut and dry in that space. Next up, still within management government, is onboarding. So
So Chris's new employer is willing to let her share some of her time through a part of May, a few hours a week. And that would be after hours for us and for her, and including Saturday. There'll be some times where they'll be able to help with the new employee. It's likely the new employee won't be able to start till potentially February 22nd or even into March. So it's really important for us to keep some of those things happening while Krista is available. But once that time in May comes, she'll no longer be available to us. So we really want to take advantage of it.
I will jump in this space and say that obviously I'm all in favor of what gives us the best opportunity to move forward without a fantastic employee who's leaving us. And so, the overlap to allow for that additional onboarding, I can't see any reason that would not be in the benefit of the borough. So I'll leave it to other folks, but I'm jumping in that early. So yeah, we're good. Whatever needs to be authorized is fine. Those are kind of no-brainers, quite frankly. The opportunity to keep you, Krista, for any bit longer that we can is something that I'll take every time it's offered. So, all right, this moves us into number 7. And so number 7 is, and I'm going to kind of open this conversation a little bit for folks so that we get context. I got a wonderful email from Gavin. And be like, what? So there's been some discussion. I had some discussion also with Alex about specifically looking at the police contract moving forward. And really about trying to bring in an outside counsel that addresses that issue for us. And so I think it may be a best position for us to look at the firm of Camel and Durant to assist with that process. I think it may give us it's not that we don't have good footing with Gavin himself, but I think having kind of specific, as we've done with some other things, to have it for that purpose, I think may give us a stronger footing going into this particular space and some of the other kind of complicated space with the police. But outside of that, we still want to retain Gavin as our solicitor. There isn't any inclination to move any other direction. Any additional comments, Alex?
Well, just this is somewhat common. I don't know if it's a percentage issue, but for labor and human resources to be handled one way, and then all of the land use and general counsel and local government functions to be handled by, the borough solicitor. So
I think that's what we're interested in. It's an interesting space, but I think we've seen you can foresee some of the upcoming complications, that we may face as we come into the kind of new negotiation. I think it may be a good move for us to honestly, also to keep kind of Gavin out of it, so that Gavin doesn't have to be always the bad guy for every single thing that we deal with. Give him a break now and then. And I don't feel bad. It's not any kind of statement on Tucker or any other. We have one of the best solicitors around. So yeah, that's my kind of post-vacation happiness, man. Me and Gavin found common ground on Star Wars, by the way. But no, I think it's not an indication of anything other than this particular space that we're in. So I'll leave that open for discussion.
Sure, I'll jump in. I had a chance to read through the packet a little bit about about that firm, and I think it makes sense given some of the circumstances we're facing right now, and good opportunity to just have that every once in a while kind of outside opinion and outside look, just to help bring different perspectives. So I think in this case, it makes a lot of sense.
I will say too, just you were, and you might make everyone a little more comfortable too. You're able to talk about this in executive session as potentially retaining.
Yeah,
legal
that's
counsel.
the limit of where. That's why I figured it's the limit of where I'm going on this.
So, but I mean, you can talk about it publicly. This is perfectly appropriate. But if you prefer, and frankly, if you don't want me to be in the room during that executive session, that would be fine too. But you don't need to necessarily debate the appointment of a special counsel during the public meeting. You can have that conversation outside of that arena.
So I don't have to keep Yeah,
You don't have to keep balancing like, oh,
praising
this
you as I say I'm getting.
right.
Yeah.
Like, oh,
Glad we can all acknowledge that fact. but
right.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we did that horribly uncomfortable dance, and we can keep doing it if you want.
I
but,
do it all the time. It's part of why I sit in this seat, I suppose, is the uncomfortable dance.
all right.
I appreciate.
Just want to throw that out.
I appreciate it. Anything else on the matter? All right. I think we're good there, unless just something else pops up. So, all righty. Moving on to finance. Looks like we got new bank account.
Yeah, so the Finance Committee met a couple weeks ago now. There were a couple points that we discussed. The first would be that we need to have a motion to open a new bank account at PNC Bank dedicated to deposits of real estate revenues. And then there were a couple other points that came out of that meeting. We're going to have a motion to pass a resolution allowing the borough to take steps to join the Pennsylvania Local Government Investment Trust. And I think Krista could probably explain that in a little bit more detail, but this would just be a motion to explore that as an option, not to actually commit to anything at this point. And then the other thing is that we need to make a recommendation, or we were going to make a recommendation to add a citizen to the pension board. And Krista, do you have anything to add to that or go into more detail?
Pliget is a commonly used financial institution by most municipalities within Pennsylvania. What that does for us is diversify the store, like where our funds are located, as well as the investments they hold are different than a traditional banking institution such as PNC. So that is why, and historically, the return rate of interest rates are higher at Pliget than a traditional institution such as like PNC or Huntington. So while this is just about protecting the borough's funds, once again, putting our money in different places to ensure stability, as well as getting the best rate of return. The Finance Committee has indicated they would like to continue to explore Pliget, and that's something that I'm working with them in our last Finance Committees here while I'm on board.
Just out of curiosity, since I'm unfamiliar with them, how did this come across to the Finance Committee? How did we learn of this?
Well, quite frankly, Pliget, and Adam did a great job by saying the whole acronym, all the letters. But it's established, quite frankly, or chartered by the Commonwealth to assist local governments as another alternative institution for banking purposes and investments. So it's in your packet. And what Adam said was another meeting of the Finance Committee is going to actually have a representative of Pliget attend. And then we're looking at March to actually have a resolution before council where we would look at establishing an account with them.
My question wasn't what are they? My question is how did it get to us? Because we've sat here for a long time in PNC not aware. So I'm just interested in how is this just common practice that wasn't in our space and in our mindset? Like how did it come to our table?
Krista mentioned it's just the best practice. It's a lot of local governments have funds with them, and
there's known to you, Krista, that it made sense.
They know our business.
It's a large discussion amongst GFOA or Government Finance Officers of America, and we do have a Pennsylvania chapter and a West chapter, and I regularly do attend those meetings. Honestly, it's kind of foreign to be on the other side of things and not have any investments with them. So that's that's why I wanted to bring it to the table.
That completely answers my question, like right there. So thank you. I appreciate it. Just I'm trying to figure out how I've sat here for years and years and years, and it's never been discussed. So I appreciate it being discussed. So that's it. So thank you. Anything else on that matter? Moving into then public safety.
We're not. I can't hear you. Yeah.
I did not turn on my mic. Well, let's just start here. The Public Safety Committee met with representatives of Wilkins Township, and we began in earnest the conversation about evolving into a combined police department, Wilkins and Churchill. So this evening, we're going to talk about moving on to the implementation of that agreement, and that will involve discussing the people we would be nominating to participate in that ongoing effort. We're moving ahead. And now the rest is, anything else to say, Jay or Alex?
I've always got something to say on this, I think.
Go ahead.
But yeah, so that the conversation with Wilkins has been on kind of multiple levels for public safety. And I think the general recommendation is to move forward if I understand the kind of the conversation that we've had amongst the committee. The questions at hand are both it's going to require chairs from multiple committees to be involved to move forward, because we are at a state now that we say, yes, we're fully interested in this. Previously we were given the kind of recommendations by the state that gave some, or by the study that gave some framework for what it could look like. There's a step involved in which we accept that framework. It doesn't mean we actually have to use that framework, but we accept that, yes, we are interested in this. We understand the framework. We're willing to kind of accept that as the framework that we're going to work from. So that's kind of the step that we're at now. As long as we are able to and willing to accept kind of the framework space, then we can kind of dig into what it's actually going to look like. And it doesn't mean that the framework is the actual thing that we're going to have. So for instance, we need to have really a steering committee that's going to really get into the nuts and bolts of the space. So the steering committee, there's a conversation of what's the composition of the steering committee. So 2 people here, 2 people, what do we need? And so there's been a little back and forth. One of the things that I think we had come to a conclusion about is there are certain people, if you're going to do a police merger, have to be in the room, right? Chiefs of police, that kind of makes sense. Borough managers, right? Another one you definitely want kind of in the room. And there was a little bit of debate about, well, we may need the head of finance, right? We start talking about, legacy costs, pension, so forth. So that we would bring people in and out as necessary. But the important part for us is that we can accept the framework and move forward. So I think as long as we're there, then I think that's something that we would entertain, kind of make sure everybody has information, put it on the agenda and move it forward. Alex, anything you want to add? All right, back to you on that one.
I just want to make a couple of points here. First of all, for council, there are a number of things in your packet for tonight that are more detailed about this process. This kind of a combined police force opportunity also includes opportunity for funding. So at the appropriate time, once we get this basic groundwork done and the basic agreement going, we'll be able to apply for a grant. We think we've got a pretty good shot at that, and that will help to facilitate the merger. The other thing is that this is not going to happen overnight. This is a process, and we have a lot of syncing to do with things that they do now, things that we do now, timing, all kinds of things. So stay tuned, but we're on our way.
Comments, thoughts, folks? Anything, nothing? There's a lot in the packet, so I think that's and it gives us enough to move forward with. All right, that being the case, then we'll keep kind of plugging along through this and jump into Matt's wheelhouse, in the magic of infrastructure.
Yeah, I know the update for the occupancy permit, I guess with resolution or ordinance at this point, was in the packets a couple of months ago. So that's something that was referred to infrastructure committee. We're going to get plugging away on that to see, if we need to make any changes to kind of the starting point that we have, or, whether we're going to recommend that to move forward. That's going to be discussed at our meeting here this week, and then we'll probably, like we did with some of our separate ordinances, you know, schedule some separate meetings to kind of work through that and get that ball moving.
I'm gonna jump to, unless, does anybody have any questions on that? What do you propose? I think we're good. On paving, I assume we're moving on to bid, suspect.
Yeah, I wasn't sure, since we haven't had our meeting yet. Alex, is there anything specific, or do you want Dennis have any comments on that, or is that just so we remember?
So let me just make sure I stop share here. When we prepared the budget last year, we mentioned roads that we would go and start to look at and start to do some estimates. And Gateway Engineering is doing that. And Dennis, you can fill us in on kind of where you're at and what we can expect in March.
Yeah, currently, the handful of roads that were at least projected for base bid was Marbury Road and Elm Hill Road, with alternates for Margate, Jamestown Place, Black Forest Road, and Brush Cliff. But that obviously is subject to change once we review it with the infrastructure committee. But at this time, we have performed the field evaluations of each of those, performing the measurements, getting all the necessary information, and putting the specifications together with an anticipated plan of going out to bid sometime in late February, March, to be ready to open and award at the April council meeting.
Any questions? I'm doubting there's any questions there. I shouldn't do that to folks. But I see nobody looking at me like they have a question in that space. Excellent. Let's move to the magical conversation of Swift Reach to Savvy Citizen.
Can everybody hear me? I didn't know if people want. Okay, perfect. Just make sure this is working. So our communications committee met a couple weeks ago. There was a lot of great discussion. One of the things we talked about was the importance of how we are communicating with our citizens. So we talked about Savvy Citizen. We are currently using Swift Reach, which is mostly used for emergencies, trash, snow, those kinds of things. We feel like we need something more. A lot of neighboring boroughs and other municipalities are using Savvy Citizen, which is an app and also a texting. So if somebody doesn't have a smartphone, they still can get information through text. So we thought that could be a great option. So that is something we talked about. We also talked about our new website that will be launched in March. So that will be very exciting. Chris, I didn't know if you wanted to add anything to those two items.
I don't have much to add to those items. You know, Savvy Citizen, I think, is a great option. But I know that's something that we've talked about in the past as well. But yeah, I'm happy to answer any questions that any of the council members might have on either of those.
Anyone else? I would emphasize that moving to Savvy Citizen has been something that a lot of many members of our public, our residents, our constituents, whatever word you'd like to use, our people have asked for quite some time, quite frankly. So I'm excited by this in the sense that I think the space of communication has been something that we've said we're going to work on. We haven't really given it the due diligence that I think we should, and I think we are now, and I'm really kind of happy that you guys are putting the time and effort to improve it. And when I say we haven't, that doesn't include Alex. I'm talking well before you, sir, because you've changed it. You and Chris have changed our communication dramatically. So let me say that now. I'm thinking about when I first got on till now. So just to clarify that point. But yeah, so anybody else is for us.
I just want to mention, in terms of communication, with the storm that was coming last week, the message that Krista prepared and shared with everybody who's registered with Swift Reach was the most thorough, professional job I've ever heard anyone do in a similar circumstance. So I just wanted to mention that's a wonderful template that you're leaving for us on that score, Chris. So thank you.
And also made me know for sure that I was not going to make my flight. Thank you. Anything else on this? All right, let's jump into where we are in climate action.
So Adam had to leave the meeting and he
Okay.
asked that I share a report from
That-
them.
That'll work.
Unfortunately, he had to go to another meeting, but he was with us. And so what he wanted us to know was the Climate Action Committee met, and one of the things we reviewed besides working on our own climate action plan and working with the Congress for Connect, the neighboring communities, Congress for neighboring communities to connect, working with them to do a climate action plan. We also had participation with Ken and the tree committee specifically. And so the couple things to update is how that committee will interface with the tree committee. And Ken had brought us up to speed on the planting that is being proposed at the Churchill Valley Greenway. As we all know, the Allegheny Land Trust now has possession of the land and developing preliminary plans to do some things there, including a pretty large ambitious tree planting. We also talked about the efforts that PennDOT possibly might be doing at Rhode Road. Believe it or not, they're looking at repaving the facility from Churchill to the Turnpike. And as a part of that, reforesting, if you will, some of that interchange space around Rhode Road. So it's a lot of green space. And quite frankly, if they maybe move from having to mow all that lawn to putting trees that could benefit, the community. We also talked about our GIS efforts and the tree committee working to inventory right-of-way trees with some volunteer time. But the borough would obviously be providing the support services, including a tablet, and helping them to do that. They get a handle on the trees that are within the right-of-way, as you know, something we've set out to do to look at regulating. And then lastly, the tree committee is glad to have their new member, Natalie, who's joined them, and they're quite active. And I shared with great affection, some of you have heard this before, our moniker for Ken. He's on the line. We call him internally KenDOT, Ken, Department of Trees. Singularly, the guy who is the Department of Trees. So he appreciated that. So if you say KenDOT, he will receive it with great warmth and affection, I'm sure.
Outstanding.
And sorry to keep that screen shared the whole time, but
It's okay. I do see on there that that there's listed the end of the 5-year agreement, and they created bid specs on waste management.
yeah, that was the other item that we have. And
Having been through that a couple of times, it's a giant red flag to me right away as we head to it. So I'm looking forward to the
so the
specs.
exciting things we're looking at doing is we would like to bring on for a small, and it's in your packet, the details, Michelle Nestor. Michelle's
Yeah.
a industry expert. And what we're looking to do, quite frankly, is modifying kind of how we do it and looking at the commercial side as well as the residential side. But Michelle will bring to the table a lot of ideas about how we might be able to improve the specifications. It's important, besides just having the industry around, having someone else who knows kind of the ins and outs of the industry to help advise the council. So we may have to change our ordinance, and we need to really get started at this. Eventually in the summer, we will bid for 3 or 5 years, whatever council decides, and we'll entertain those bids so that January 1, 2023, whether it's the existing vendor or a new vendor, new hauler, there'll be new specs that they'll live with.
And I would just say that have some of the conversations that I've had, both knowing the past and looking at kind of the future in this space, that both bringing on someone is a great idea, because I think it really opens up the possibilities for us in how we address what has been a complicated space for us in the past. So, I think there's an opportunity for us, to really make sure that we have the best process, right, that works for Churchill moving forward. And I appreciate, Alex, the effort that you've put in, that the committee's put in, to kind of position us in the right space. So thank you to everyone. That's what I'm saying. Anyone else on that one before we roll in? We've got 14 exoneration of Daniel Weaver for the remainder of the 2021 taxes, which is basically the simple movement of the delinquent taxes outside of the current tax collector over to the delinquent tax collector. It's kind of standard. It's basically the current tax collector can't collect delinquent. We move it over to Jordan, and that's that. So there really isn't much to push in the discussion space, just to let you know. But I figured I'd spell it out for folks so that they know what it is. Conversation on the deputy tax collector. Where are we at with this, people? I'm looking at the people for where we're at, not you guys. This is you know, Alex and Gavin, for those of you, the borough manager and the solicitor looked at me like, why are you asking me? I'm not asking you all. This is a decision that has to come from council. And so the question really is, where are we at? You know, at this point, you know, her position is, hey, it's somebody who has experience, right? Who doesn't need training. You know, no, she's not a Churchill resident, but, you know, I'm her deputy, she's my deputy. Right. Effectively, you know, it functions, you know, it works, blah. There was just as a recap for folks, and then I'll be quiet.
Sure.
There was a request on our end to say, hey, we'd like to have somebody who is in fact a resident of Churchill, so that people from our own community are there. And that was where the disconnect was. So folks, give me what you got so we can bring this to a close.
Yeah, I just, I think we would have preferred someone from the borough. But the fact is that, you know, there is this reciprocal arrangement with the woman in Chalfont in terms of our tax collector has been appointed as the deputy to that tax collector. Secondly, quite honestly, we didn't come up with anyone. You know, we didn't come up with an alternative. So I'm reasonably content at going forward with her recommendation.
I agree with Diane. In the perfect world, if we had, you know, someone from Churchill, that'd be great. But it just sounds like Carol has a lot of good experience and she could probably jump right in. And yes, again, in the perfect world, it'd be great if she was from Churchill, but we really just want the best person for the job. So I think it's great if we can get her.
Brooke, anyone else? Let's see, Brooke, I don't want to forget my online space.
I have no additional commentary on that.
We're good, I feel you. Anyone else? We're good? All right, so I think the position of council then is that we'll accept the recommendation on the deputy. We can move forward with that. And that brings that to a close in that space. 16, we've got discussion of officers board commission appointments. So there's a couple on here that got some bullets. These we need to kind of move those forward. So there really isn't much of a discussion today. But what we do need to do is get that lined up. So I need to speak with the folks at public safety and with Alex and make sure that we get those folks up. Am I missing anything, Alex?
Deb and I will be meeting with work on the rec board.
Right. Yeah, I'm already on the rec board, but yes, we have to get together and iron all that out.
Brooke, yeah. Can we find time to meet with Alex to talk about the Human Relations Commission so we can get it up and going?
Yes. Yes, we can discuss that.
Okay, so if you can send some times over, then we'll coordinate it and get it going.
Oh,
That's good.
Perfect. Moving on to 17 then, which is the magic of kind of our building in the Yeagle room conversation. So as you recall, the last meeting we had a conversation that said, you know, effectively come back in February and really kind of pick up where are we, what are the conditions, what are we doing, how are we moving forward. It is now February. We are here. And so, you know, this is one that I think there may be differing opinions. So I have a very clear opinion where I am. What I will do though is cede the floor for a second and then see where we're at. So if anybody wants to kind of jump into the space of conversation, I'm happy to let them do that. If nobody wants to, I will start it for folks. So
I'll give a minute, see if anybody wants to speak.
Oh, Deb,
No,
I
you
think
go ahead,
maybe,
Diane. Go ahead.
no, go ahead. I think we
Go
Deb
ahead, Deb.
first.
I've kind of done a 180 on this. I think it probably is time where maybe we can open it up for small groups and with stipulations, perhaps, and we can discuss this. Do they all have to be vaccinated? I think they would probably all have to be vaccinated because that's what we do here. And that maybe perhaps they are responsible for cleaning, disinfecting the room when they're done. And we'll have a limit to how many people can come and work with it that way. Because as April said, there are so many boroughs opening up now on a smaller basis. And I mean, I feel for the garden club that, you know, they're spending money, and I understand that. And I know we're being very, very careful and the Omicron's going down, but I do think it's time to open it up on maybe even a part-time basis with a small group, small groups.
I'm very torn by this, like everybody else. I want this to be done. But I also know that there were more deaths from COVID in Allegheny County in January than at any other time since the vaccine became available. And I fear that everybody wants this to end so much that we're doing, you know, we're deluding ourselves about how dangerous this still is. So I also have some concerns about how we ensure that people are following our instructions. If you're renting the room, and how do we know that people are coming in are vaccinated? How do we know that they're doing what it is that we ask them to do? When we're talking about opening up, and that's true for the council as well. You can say opening up, but there are some very specific things that have to happen in that situation. And who is going to do the doing? Who is going to deal with it in practice? So I'm open, you know, to hearing about that, but those details are going to be crucial. And I am conservative, and there's a reason why I'm conservative, and that's because the virus is not gone.
I'm completely open to the Yago community room being opened. And like Deb said, you know, and April mentioned on the call, limiting the number of people, ensuring that it's cleaned and things like that. I don't know if we're able to say that everybody that uses it needs to be vaccinated. That's a really challenging space to put that out there. But I'm definitely open to the conversation in regards to the borough building. I think there's a lot of conversation that needs to be had before we even have that, like tech space, like how are we going to accommodate tech? The way our current room is set up, it doesn't really leave much space for public right now. So I think that's just a conversation we need to start having. I'm open, very limited number of people and must be vaccinated. So I'm just seeing what everybody says and have a conversation about it and see what we can do.
Well, if I can make a couple comments, as president of Charles Garden Club, as April pointed out, you know, we're spending extra money to rent other places to have our functions. As a matter of fact, in March, we spent another some of our funds to be at the Forest Hills Recreation Center. So, and we are gathering together. We're not a large group, and you know, everyone's pretty cautious when we get there. I mean, other places are doing it. We have gone to those functions. I can see that we'd at least consider letting us come in. Our next activity will be in April, and it would be nice if we could be in the room by then. It'd be a little nicer. We can at least open the doors a little bit and get some air coming through it. It would help out a little bit. So I'd, you know, if we can consider opening that up, would be, I think we could do it safely, even though we see some numbers spiking, and we can ask our members to, you know, make sure they're vaccinated, wear masks, if they feel comfortable, but we have been doing it. Thank you.
Other folks?
So yeah, I'm comfortable opening. You know, I think we're reaching the point where things are shifting on the virus, and ultimately, those folks that may have exposure issues, whatever else, you have a choice. You can be vaccinated, and it's very effective. So, I'm comfortable certainly opening up the Yeagle room to groups. It's a separate space, I think, which is helpful. So it's not like it's a big meeting room where you have to come through 8 parts of the building, has its own entrance. Certainly, we'd want to promote masking and, vaccination. I don't know if we can require that or not. That's a discussion, I think. And sanitization between different groups. For the borough building, I think we have talked a little bit previously about how we can do that safely. I think at least opening our front doors, that way people can be served at the windows, either by the police or borough staff, through window service, is something we can do here shortly. As far as the meetings go, that's a little bit trickier, and I'm open to discussion, but I think we need to be moving in that direction.
Brooke, you have a comment?
I more so have a question. Mayor, can you explain, you were saying that you were renting space at the Forest Hills, Westinghouse Lodge, and a couple other places. Can you talk to what procedures they have in place? Is there a cleaning fee? Is there a waiver that you need to sign? What are some of those policies?
No, there's no cleaning fees. There's no waivers. There's no requirement that anyone wear a mask or show proof of vaccination. We just go in and we basically don't do much other than hold the meetings. We do have our hospitality, but it's usually something that's pretty light, maybe some, coffee and your cookie kind of things. Or it was, we had our Christmas party there and it was catered. And we did probably about 35, 40 people at that Christmas party. And that was a cold time, but we were all in the room together. I would say half the people wore masks.
Right.
So.
Okay. Well, I think if the consensus of council is to open up the Yeagle room, I would suggest that we create a policy for the maximum number of occupants that we would allow in the space. As far as mandating that everyone is vaccinated, I'm not really sure how we would enforce that unless someone would be on site to check that each person attending the event is vaccinated. Otherwise, you would just have to trust that whoever has rented the room is going to enforce that policy if that's something that council decides.
Just another comment too. I went to our grandson had their little basketball game last weekend. And when one group leaves through the left door, before the other group comes in, they were walking around in that gymnasium, spraying something in the air. I'm not sure what it was. So they were actually clearing out the room before a new group of people come in. I don't know whether like cans of Lysol would be, equivalent to whatever they were spraying just to kind of clear the air. But in the case of us, the garden club using the Yeagle room, it's not like when we leave, another group comes in right behind us. The room may be empty for another week, 2 weeks before someone else comes in. I don't know, but certainly we could come up with something for the cleaning process. If the group has to do to themselves, I'm sure we would, not find that a difficult thing to do.
So I think there's a general support to, first of all, open up the Yeagle room with the understanding that it will be open. There would be some type of requirement to disinfect on the way out. I don't even know that it necessarily needs to be, fee-based or anything, but just, common decency says, right? Like if you're in the room and you have your group, then spray down the tables, like put the stuff back. I don't think it's a hard stretch. And if we find that people aren't doing that, then those people and those groups will not be allowed back, quite frankly. I think that's one of the realisms of that, because they'll be violating the policies that we put in place. But I think that I do think we're in general agreement there, and I don't see that as problematic. And to that point, I think Brooke is correct in the space of saying, how would you enforce a vaccine mandate, even if you had one, other than to say that we we want everyone to be vaccinated who's in the space, because it would require our actual manpower to be in the room, right? To say, okay, everyone who was here showed me their vaccination card before they entered the room. And that would be, quite frankly, difficult to actually do. It would be hard on staff. It would make things unmanageable. So I think if we have a protocol that gives a certain, that caps off the numbers, we'll have to look at what that looks like, but gives a maximum number of people, requires that, upon leaving, that they are to clean the room and disinfect the room. I think we're in a good space to kind of open up the Eagle room, and that can be done on short order. I don't think that quite requires a long period of time to do. The second point that Matt makes, that we talked about before, I also agree with, just kind of on my space, which is entering the common space to we have plexiglass, we're not interacting with folks. It's just the difference of them buzzing and then bothering people versus coming inside and knocking on plexiglass. I do think, and Alex pointed out before, we need to have a hand sanitizer station on the inside for folks. That's part of kind of the protocol for coming inside. I think that's reasonable. I think asking that people wear masks inside, because we don't know their vaccination status, for instance, is something that is also within reason in that space. So I think that gets us to the inside space, and it gets us to the Eagle room space. That then brings us to the meeting space, right? And Valerie brought up a very good point about kind of people don't realize, because you haven't been in this room, how things are actually technically set up right now for us to work and do these meetings and have you all see us. To which, first of all, I would give Krista and Alex just mad credit for making this work. But for those of you who've been to our meetings before, you're used to seeing all the chairs lined up and then we're right in front of you. And that technically would not work right now. We have a giant kind of TV monitor on a table in front of us that blocks half the view. And we literally have room right now for 6 chairs. Like, I'm looking right at them. We got a table over here, a thing over there. And apparently we have chandeliers, because then, as much as Diana's trying to show the rest of the room, she's showing the ceiling. But so I am in favor of figuring out how to bring people into the next meeting. But it's not going to be as simple as a quick conversation at the table. It's also going to require, because the other thing I think it is in our residents, our citizens' best interest to be able to continue to connect remotely, right? Even if some people want to come in, right? We have more people that will connect via the Zoom link than are going to show up at our meetings. Granted, if we have some, important issue, it'll pack a room, and that's, and then we have numbers restrictions and COVID issues. But overall, even like a meeting like tonight, right? People who are able to link in and link out at their leisure, it's a better space. Well, that requires a different format than even what we have right now. So we have to move from the current format to a hybrid format, which the communication committee is working on. And that's not something that we have a quick and easy answer for. So that's the next thing. And then that brings us to, additionally, the workshop space versus the business meeting space, right? For councils in our discussion and in a workshop discussion, I'm going to try and hold this right now as a workshop discussion, right? Because one of the things that's happened, right, because of the Zoom space, is our workshop works like a business meeting. We've talked about this, right? So I'm staring at the screen to talk to you all when I really need to be able to communicate kind of back and forth with you all, right? To talk about, what's this issue? What are we doing? So we need to talk about what the communication looks like in a workshop session. Like, to me, I thought about this on the way over here, which is, we have the public comment, but this is not conducive, right, for workshop, right? The seating that, and people don't realize, the seating of the council chambers is not conducive for workshop. So, do we move to something that says on workshop days, we do public comment and then have kind of a Facebook Live, and we're over in that room where we can work, and have a camera up that just kind of beams it in, that people can see it, but that's that. Right. And then we're back in our space.
But not everybody has Facebook.
Well, I'm talking about Facebook,
okay.
Zoom, just in terms of the online space. but it's not this like everyone in front of their tablet, everybody kind of sitting there so that, so that we can actually work together and not be in a business meeting together, once again. For a number of you haven't even seen that, right? So you don't even know what it's supposed to work like, but you all have been in meetings, and you've been in meetings where you're trying to do collaborative work, and you've been in meetings when you're trying to just hold a meeting in which you're not going to collaborate. This is a non-collaborative setup. Absolutely. Right. So there are real conversations that we're going to have to work through over the next few weeks, and that we're looking to communication committee, but also all of us, to sort through on how we reopen a regular meeting. I don't think there's a question of whether we want to or whether we're even going to, but I do think there's a substantial question of how it's going to work. And it is not as simple as folks who would say, well, just open the doors and let people in. Because quite frankly, COVID aside, doing that will actually limit more people's access to our meetings than increase it. And what it would actually do is play to the people who can come here and who are vocal, and play against the people who want to see us and maybe aren't vocal and maybe just log in, So to that end, I feel not only are we talking about kind of not just willy-nilly opening the doors in a COVID space, I think we're talking about not willy-nilly opening the doors to make sure the most amount of people have access to our meetings. So in summary, after that soapbox, the Eagle Room, I think we can open right away. Main lobby, we'll talk with Alex, but I think that's relatively pretty quick with, some sanitation issues or some sanitary issues. In here, we've got to talk about the kind of hybrid setup, and workshop, I think, is an even more complicated conversation. So that's mine. I don't know if anybody has any comments on that, but that's where I'm at.
Yeah, I have one more comment. I'm sorry, man. One more comment about using the egg room. I was just thinking about it while everyone was talking, that we could have the group, as part of the protocol, require the groups to have a little station set up, similar to when you go on a cruise. When you walk into the dinner line, they spray your hands before you can go in and get the food. So we have someone stationed right at the door. When you come in, you get a good dose of hand sanitizer before you come into the room.
And I think that's the same. We'll have that kind of in both locations. So the main lobby, the Eagle Room. I don't think that's a heavy lift. I think it's something that we can definitely do. Matt, I think the floor is yours.
Yeah, Jay, I was just going to say, I absolutely 100% agree with your comment, though, that, we need to find a way that we can do this with the technology that will allow us to do, online Zoom, continue to have that participation, because this has been great. I mean, COVID's been bad, but this part has been great, that people can participate. They can do it remotely. We can get more folks, working with council and having their input. So absolutely, that's important, and we have to do it the right way.
And I would further comment that I know that Valerie and the rest of the communication committee have this on their plate, and that they're working at it.
Can I just make one comment from the operations standpoint with opening the Eagle Room? Because this is what I fear, is that tomorrow I'm going to get a phone call like, let's book starting this date. We've kind of talked about this previously, like the schedules of all these groups have kind of changed. So like people that used to meet on Tuesday afternoons are now meeting Wednesdays, and people kind of want to reserve different times. That's something we've gotten from conversations and emails. Also, like access codes to the building will need updated. So there's a bit of a curve when it comes to operations, and Alex, myself, and Ralph have talked about this at length, preparing for this day. But I just want to make sure I would clarify, like, this isn't like we're opening the floodgate. Like, there is still a little bit of a curve.
Duly noted. I don't want to throw you under the bus of saying, and now everyone call because it's yours to go. I think it is absolutely duly noted that in the space of council saying, yes, we are good to reopen kind of now, what that means is a directive to the management team to get that in place. It does not mean that effective immediately people can reserve and be in the space. It's still going to require, even if it was like, yeah, not to worry about the booking part, it's still going to require, we need to have the policy in place about what's required when you come in, right? Yeah. What do you have to do? So this in no way is to imply that, yes, so tomorrow you can start coming in. But it is to say that for council and for the management team, that now is the time to put that together and make sure that we're able to move forward. And then as soon as we are, we will announce openly to everyone, the floodgates are open, come get us, and let's get everybody in here and have as much fun as we can here at Churchill. But I think we've got to first set that policy now that we've all agreed that it's time to open. Alex, yes.
The communications committee and the infrastructure together, we're looking at doing some rewiring in this room. You have budgeted this year to do, to make the technology less duct tape and more permanent, including like removing the chandelier so we have more space to mount, for example, screens up above. And the furniture itself is clunky and large, which limits space. So we're looking at some costs for that as well. So those committees will be kind of working together in the wiring and rewiring. So stay tuned for that. I like what you're saying about the workshop room itself, because there may be ways to, with not a lot of investment, create that space that you're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, I've done that space, and I recognize, and I get the chandelier space. I didn't think about that. That's a real important one. No, I mean, it really is. In order to kind of mount proper kind of camera and projection and screen, right? All three of those. You don't think about it, but I just, in my old office, we went kind of semi-virtual before COVID. And one of the things right away for meeting space is I had to mount they're kind of drop screens, right? Like remote drop screens that come down. Here, and you guys are already talking the angling so that when we have public in and not public in, there's a lot of considerations as you know. But yeah, I am, it's not simply open the doors. And that's the part that I want all of us to know, as well as everyone else to know, that it does require figuring out what's the best way to open those doors. Now that we all agree, now that we're like, yes, okay, we want to move forward. There's real work that has to get done in this space to keep people connected online while people come in. So appreciate that. Anything else on that matter? Because that's going to be a really kind of fun one. If you want my opinion.
I have a question. As far as drafting policy for the requirements, is that going to be divvied out to a committee, or how is that?
That'll go to appropriate committee.
Okay.
This way, and then through Alex. So it goes basically committee chair and Alex work together on those moments.
And then a quick follow-up question. I know certainly I wouldn't hold anyone to it, but just are we thinking like by March 1st, the Eagle Room would be achievable? Does that sound reasonable? I mean, just so folks aren't calling tomorrow, but understanding like there is this 2 months out, like what are we thinking?
I don't see, I don't want to speak for Alex because he's got to put the
well, and that's,
logistics
I
into
was
it,
looking for
so-
input from Alex and Krista, just based on what Krista brought up.
Again, that's reasonable. I mean, depending on the way you phrase it, that's when we start taking reservations, right? So maybe
Right.
it's-
Right. Okay.
maybe
So
April's
that's
when
a
they
good
actually have their
target,
first
and
meetings.
we'll update if we need to. But
Yeah, but I think it's fair. Thanks for putting a date down, because I think otherwise it's just a call every day. Like how about
right.
now?
Yeah.
How
That
about
way
now?
folks know that, we'll be looking for March 1st
Right,
and
to start taking reservations and for the Jaeger.
Right.
That's the date that was in my head, so I probably think it's reasonable.
Cool. Easy peasy.
Easy peasy.
Running into any additional things people want to discuss?
If I could just make one comment, I met this afternoon with the Connect group. And so that's an up and coming thing. They had a timeline up there, somewhere around in June, July this summer. They would like to see this program implemented, with all the participating boroughs and townships that are involved with it. For the, yeah, it is the lead. Connect the lead is the
program through Connect. Okay.
yeah. So, yeah. So I pretty much it was more of an informational thing today. Mary Jo or Joe Ellen Marsh, who runs it, asking the participants, I think there were about 20 of us, what do we want to meet quarterly? How do we want to continue with that? And then, making sure the chiefs are on board with all this. I know Tom Caulfield now is down in the kind, but he was definitely on board with that, and some of the other judges are on. So, and if you don't know much about it, I mean, it makes common sense that when you have you're out there for a rest because Judge Kimberly, Kimberly, come on. I don't want to say Clark. Anyway, Judge Kim was on there. She's the president of the council. And she was saying, you know, these young people get out and they get a record and it's hard for them to get a job. So it's just to nip it in the bud as early as you can. And also one of the other things she was talking about, they're looking for volunteers. They had this word cloud, you know, community, elected officials, school board members, clergy, you know, who could be on these committees? She was asking, you know, someone had some background in, what is it? You know, dealing with people, social work, thank you, social work. It's a volunteer thing. I didn't volunteer anyone's name, nor did I raise my hand either, but, you know, somehow they want to get the word out. So if there is someone in our community that feels that they would like to be part of that, they could certainly volunteer to get in that.
If only I knew someone.
Well, that name came in my head as well.
For the social work field. Who could put the word out? So.
So anyhow. Well, but if somebody like, you know, like yourself, Valerie, could know somebody that might be interested in that. So, but anyway, that was just a little update as to where that stood as of today.
Appreciate it. So my subtle play. Other comments for discussion before we've got to move into an exec as well.
Just want to note the attendance this evening. So we have some who are obviously in the room, and we have, I think, 8 attendees that are, you know, out in the, you don't see their pictures. And then on Facebook, we have another 7 individuals who are participating this evening.
Again, even on our slowest days, the online space has afforded more folks than
Absolutely.
we were seeing, you know, on days we were doing, you know, passing budgets, quite frankly. So prior to this, so once again, we appreciate everyone who is here. That being the case, unless there is something else, I would move to adjourn and head into an executive session on litigation and personnel. Trying to figure out which way I want to frame this, but yeah, definitely personnel and definitely litigation. So
Brooke, please stay with us and everyone else.
Yep. So everyone else, thank you for your time. We appreciate you. Those of us in council, Brooke, please don't leave us, and we'll take it from there. All right. Thanks, everyone. We'll take like 2 seconds and then jump in. All right. Outstanding.
Do you want me to head out?
See
Bye,
you,
everybody.
sir.